What's up, Glenn? Nothing much.
Recording in progress.
Let's go ahead and get started. Before we begin, I'd like to ask for a moment of silence to mark the 23rd anniversary of the September 11th attacks. Thank you.
We had the siren.
Exactly. I'd like to call the meeting to order. I'd like to ask everybody to please silence their phones and beepers if they have any. Good evening. This board is comprised of 7 members. 4 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the affirmative vote of 4 members shall be necessary for the adoption of any motion. If only 4 members of the board are present, an applicant may request and be entitled to a continuance to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. If a matter is continued due to a lack of quorum, the chairperson or secretary of the board may set a special meeting to consider such matter. In the event that 4 votes are not obtained, an applicant, except in the case of a comprehensive plan amendment, may request a continuance or allow the application to proceed to the City Commission without a recommendation. Pursuant to Resolution Number 2021-118, the City of Coral Gables has returned to traditional in-person meetings. However, the Planning and Zoning Board has established the ability for the public to provide comments virtually. For those members of the public who are appearing on Zoom and wish to testify, you must be visible to the court reporter to be sworn in. Otherwise, if you speak without being sworn in, your comments may not have evidentiary value. Lobbyist registration and disclosure. Any person who acts as a lobbyist must register with the city clerk as required pursuant to city code. As chair, I now officially call the City of Coral Gables Planning and Zoning Board meeting of September 11, 2024 to order. The time is 6:03. Jill, please call the roll.
Robert Behar. Julio Gabriel. Here. Sue Kowalinsky. Here. Felix Pardo. Here. Javier Salman.
Here.
Chip Withers.
Here.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Here. Notice regarding ex parte communications. Please be advised that this board is a quasi-judicial board, which requires board members to disclose all ex parte communications and site visits. An ex parte communication is defined as any contact, communication, conversation, correspondence, memorandum, or other written or verbal communication that takes place outside a public hearing between a member of the public and a member of a quasi-judicial board regarding matters to be heard by the board. If anyone made any contact with a board member regarding an issue before the board member must state on the record the existence of the ex parte communication and the party who originated the communication. Also, if a board member conducted a site visit specifically related to the case before the board member must also disclose such site visit. In either case, the board member must state on the record whether the ex parte communication and/or site visit will affect the board member's ability to impartially consider the evidence to be presented regarding the matter. The board member should also state that his or her decision will be based on substantial competent evidence and testimony presented on the record today. Does any member of the board have such a communication and/or site visit to disclose at this time? No? Swearing in, everyone who speaks this evening must complete the roster on the podium. We ask that you print clearly so the official records of your name and address will be correct. Now, with the exception of attorneys, all persons physically in the City Commission chambers who will speak on the agenda items before us this evening, please rise to be sworn in. Thank you. Again, I ask everybody to please sign in with Jill that will be speaking tonight. Zoom platform participants. I will ask any person wishing to speak on tonight's agenda item to please open their chat and send a direct message to Jill Menendez stating you would like to speak before the board and include your full name. Jill, we'll call you when it's your turn. I ask you to be concise for the interest of time. Phone platform participants. After Zoom platform participants are done, I will ask phone platform participants to comment on tonight's agenda item. I also ask you to be concise for the interest of time. The first item we have is the approval of minutes of August 14th, 2024. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have first and a second
The motion?
to approve the minutes.
Yes.
I moved it.
Any comments? No? Call the roll, please.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
Sue Kabalinski,
Yes.
Felix Pardo. Javier Salman,
Yes.
Chip Withers. A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes. The procedure we'll use tonight. First, we'll have the identification of the item by Mr. Caller, presentation by applicant or agent, then presentation by staff. Afterwards, I'll go ahead and open for public comment, first in chambers, then the Zoom platform, followed by the phone line platform. Then we'll go ahead and close public comment, have board discussion, then a motion, further discussion if needed, and a second of the motion. Then board's final comments and a vote. Before we begin, I'd also like to thank city staff for the wonderful chairs that we got. Just on a little side note, they're really good and comfortable. Thank you. Mr. Fowler?
Item E1, a resolution of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, approving mixed-use site plan and conditional use review pursuant to zoning code Article 14, process section 14-203, conditional uses for a proposed mixed-use project referred to as 33 Alhambra on the property legally described as all of Block 15, Coral Gables, Section L. That's 20 and 42 Navarra Avenue, 33, 43, and 47 Alhambra Circle, and 2001 Galliano Street, Coral Gables, Florida, including required conditions providing for a repealer provision, severability clause, and providing for an effective date. Item E1, public hearing.
Thank you. Mr. Garcia, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mario Garcia Serra with offices at 600 Brickell Avenue. Here this evening representing 33 Alhambra Propco, the owner of and developer of the 33 Alhambra project. I'm joined this evening by Jorge Cepero and Jenny Ducret of NG Developer, as well as our project architects, Glenn Pratt and David Fuentes of Bell & Pratt and Fuentes, who will soon present the project to you. However, first let me familiarize everyone with the site and also tell you what has changed from the project which we presented to you about a year ago on this same property. There we go. You have an aerial photo. Let's go to the aerial photo there. Here we have an aerial photo of the property. You'll see that the project site is a city block that is bordered by Alhambra Circle on the southeast, Menorca Avenue on the southwest, Galliano on the west, and Navarre on the north. This site is a little over an acre in size and is zoned MX2. The project which we presented to you last year proposed a rezoning of the property to MX3 or, in the alternative, a code amendment to allow for a taller height. That project generated some controversy and some opposition, so we withdrew it and went back to the drawing board and redesigned the project so that it complies 100% with the site's existing MX2 zoning. This project does not require any change in zoning or variances. It is completely based on what the zoning code presently allows and even has less density than what is presently permitted. We now have a 78-unit, 8-story condominium building with a penthouse and also with retail uses on the ground floor and office uses on the second floor. There you see the existing land use and zoning maps for the property. We can go to the next slide. And here are the highlights of this project. As mentioned previously, the project complies 100% with the existing zoning. It's only using approximately half of its allowed density. Its permitted max is somewhere around 140 units, probably a little bit more. We are proposing 78 units. As far as ground level open space, we have double the requirement, 11,351, as opposed to the 4,877 that is required. We've put extensive landscaping at the street level, and the streetscape is considerably improved. There is an overall reduction in the mass, of course, of the building, and we now have a 10-foot step back for the tower that goes around the building completely. There is a reduction in height, as mentioned before. Before we were proposing 12 stories, now it is down to 8 stories plus penthouse. And then of that height, only about 25% of the total height of that tower is actually at the 97-foot level. Glenn will show you. There's a certain amount that goes up to 97, but the vast majority of the building is at a lower height. We've enhanced pedestrian access and the pedestrian experience around the property. And there is also an existing historic building which we are preserving, maintaining, and adaptively reusing at 42 Navarre. So with that said, I'll ask Glenn and David now to walk you through the project.
Good evening, Glenn Pratt, Bell & Pratt and Fuentes Architects, 301 Almeria, Suite 210.
And David Fuentes.
As some of you may have remembered from the previous presentation that we made when we were looking to try and create more. Sorry, how's that? From the previous presentation, when we were looking for the change of zoning in exchange for creating more ground space, we thought that that was a good idea, I guess, at the time, and it wasn't overly well received. So we've gone back, as Mario said, to the drawing board and totally redesigned the building to be 100% in compliance with the code. We have essentially an 8-story building with a penthouse on the top. That this would be a view from Alhambra Circle. The client is a very well-known developer here in the city that's developed other really high-end products that we have also been a part of. The Biltmore Park on Valencia is one of the projects that we did for them. And so they asked us if we could make a building that was somewhat similar to that as a high-end condominium with large terraces that have a lot of the ability to open up the interior space to be able to enjoy the outdoors. Hopefully, weather that will be soon coming. It's been not weather-like now. But so this, as you see, there's a series of towers that have large balconies that are used throughout the building. It's an element actually that one of the things when we were doing the Mediterranean bonus study, it's an element that actually H. George Fink, one of the premier architects of Coral Gables, used, and we really liked part of a lot of the details that he used. So we've introduced a lot of those elements into the building for the tower and for the roof and for the ground levels, the pedestal piece. This is an aerial view of the front of the building, the Alhambra side, from above. And one of the things that we've also done is in the tower elements, we have parapet walls that go to conceal all of the mechanical equipment, so that essentially the roof will be given to 2 larger units that have some really super terraces, and the rest of the roof element is used as the the amenity space. And one of the things that we're proposing to have is a pickleball court on the front, as pickleball has really been a popular sport and takeoff. So you see actually and David, I don't know if you can use the laser to, on the roof, on the tower elements, we've concealed all of the air conditioning equipment, so all of the mechanical equipment will be totally concealed from the street and from the view. So all you really see is just the nice building. It's all of the mechanical workings will be totally concealed. And you can see the pickleball court on the front where David's pointing the laser. And the 2 penthouse units, they have the terraces, large terraces that wrap around the building on the north and on the south. Those will be private terraces for the unit itself. We can go to the next slide. Sorry for the, this is a view from the corner of Navarre and Alhambra, and you can see that in part of the design of the building, we've tried to break it down into smaller elements and into elements that allowed us to use a lot of the architectural pieces that a lot of the city founding architects used. And so and I'll show you as we move around the building, the set of slides is intended to kind of take you around the building. One of the things that we've always felt is that because it's an entire city block, the building is going to be viewed from every street, and so every view should be exceptional, and every view is essentially a front view. So we've taken great lengths to try and create a lot of detailing and activity and amenities that reinforce that feeling. If you go to the next slide. This is a view from Alhambra and Navarre again at the street level, so that you can see the pedestal. The retail, it has a mixed-use project. We have retail on the ground floor. The second level, excuse me, the second level is an office level. And we put that in both as a way to animate the street and to create activity and light, so that you're not just looking at a parking garage. It's the office level is actually a liner element that conceals the parking on the second level, and you'll see that, and we'll show you that in plan to understand. And the third level is really the only full parking level that we have in the building to satisfy. All of the parking is completely satisfied in the building. We have 146 spaces. We're over the requirement. And again, one of the things that was important to us architecturally was the kind of these reinforced corners, so that there's a very prominent decorative element that goes all the way from the roof line, cornice piece, all the way and flares out at the bottom to create an anchoring for the building that grounds it to the ground plane. We can go to the next slide. This is a view from Navarre, and you can see that the little historic building, that's always been a very important element that we've felt in the process of designing the building. And one of the reasons also that we were looking to try and find some more park space for the building, we're actually substantially over the amount of green space required. We have about 6,000 square feet over the sorry for this technical. We have about 6,000 square feet over the open green space requirement that's required by code. And we use that to create the park on the northwest corner of Navarre and Galliano, to really give the historic building enough breathing room and so that it doesn't get lost in the project and it doesn't feel like it's squeezed or sandwiched in. In addition, one of the things that we're also proposing to do is to create a green wall on the garage structure behind the building, so that it essentially greens out the building and makes just a very green, lush backdrop to the historic structure. Our parking garage entry, exit, and service is just to the left of that. And there's a little dog park I should say really more of a dog walk, because it's not really very large, but it's an area where the residents can use to walk their dogs. And then on the north side, to the right, you'll see the large private park that we're creating as the buffer. Again, there's the arcade goes completely around the building at the ground level. At this level, the only this corner and the Galliano side is the only side that has the exposed parking at the second level. All the other street sides and the east portion of Navarre has the office space. But you can see the large green open space that we've used to buffer the historic building. Go to the next one. Oh, I'm sorry, if you go back. Just to quickly talk about one thing, one of the things that in the previous version, when the building was thinner and taller, we had sufficient room to put the pool and some of the amenities on the pedestal level at the fourth level. When it's kind of like a balloon analogy, when you've got the same volume, but you're pushing the height down, the building kind of expands. And so what we wound up doing is putting the amenities on the roof. And so you see on the top of on the Navarre and Galliano corner is where we've got the pool and the pool amenity, the spas, and then there's also an area for the residents as open cookout areas and lounge areas. So we feel it's going to be a really spectacular view from up there and really a nice amenity for the building to have the roof pool. This is the corner from Navarre and Galliano, looking back at the park and the historic building. And you can see that, what's really nice about the open park is that it really provides a lot of viewing area for the historic building. The historic building is really a gem. It's just a really nice little structure. We couldn't, when we were doing the studies, we couldn't really find very much information on who the architect was. There was very limited documentation, but the structure itself is really, really nice. It's like somebody walked out of the door in 1929 and just left things exactly the way that they were. There's breccia pernice floors. There's all kinds of it has these Pecky cypress ceilings and ceiling beams. It has all these hand-painted ceramic tile floors that with little individual hand-painted Spanish ceramic tile. So it's really a gem that I think is really going to be an enhancement to and we're going to be. The only issue is that it's going to be difficult to try and find an adaptive reuse. We're in the process of trying to study all of the possibilities. It's difficult because obviously it was built in 1926, and it just doesn't comply with ADA standards and with accessibility and all of the things that would need if it is used by the public. Would be required by ADA requirements. So we're studying how to try and keep the building and use it in a special way that would allow it to stay the way that it is. It's really a beautiful. Anyway, so this is again the corner. If we move to the next, this is along the Galliano side, and in the areas where the building pulls back. On the amenity level, we've created lush gardens, and the garden that David is showing right now is kind of an amenity piece to the interior amenities that will be connected with that, the gym and the workout rooms and spa and sauna. But the majority of the units on the amenity level have these really large terraces that are going to be for the resident really incredible. Right, if we move to the next one. This is a ground view from the corner of Menorca and Galliano. So you can see how the building, but one of the things we were trying to also do is to make sure that massing-wise, that it really pulled back from the street and didn't feel overpowering, and that it just had the feel of the fit. And you can see again the one of the corners, all four of the corners of the main building on Alhambra are treated in the same way and come down to the ground. And so that each of the elements of the pedestal kind of plug into that tower piece. This is a view from Alhambra and Menorca. And one of the things, again, that we're also doing is we've got a really, what we feel is a beautiful cornice piece that wraps the roof and ties all of the towers together. Again, in one of the architectural, the Med Bonus architectural studies that we did, we found that was really an element that was used extensively, the way that they would tie the tower or the roof line into a tower to make as a way of terminating it. So, and this is back, we're back to the front elevation of Alhambra. Okay, sorry. We're very proud of our building, so I like talking about it. I'm sorry to take your time. This is, as you can see from the site plan, we've totally wrapped the building with arcades, and so that, and we have that goes completely around the building with the exception of the historic portion. There's also a paseo that goes through. We've consolidated, again, all of the service and entry drives on the Navarre side, which is away from the school side and the traffic on the Alhambra. We've got retail space on the ground level. There's a series of lobbies that access the office space, and then that also that's separate from accessing the tower. We go to the next. We go to the next. This is the second floor that you can see the office space wraps around the Navarre and the Menorca side, so that only the Galliano side has the visible parking. The third floor is the total parking, and this is the amenity level or the pedestal level, top, the fourth floor, that has the amenities and starts the beginning of the units. This is the typical floor for the condominium, and then this is the roof where you see the two large units that are on the roof that have their own private terraces, and the amenity space and pickleball court in the center. And this is just a roof plan that shows the equipment. The materials we're using we're using barrel tile. We've got different types of stucco finishes, smooth and textured. We're using precast stone for some of the architectural elements on the building. We're using natural stone on the lower pieces of the building where the public is. We're using wrought iron and decorative grills that have a very distinct Mediterranean feel. This just gives you an idea. This is a typical tower and elevation and section that shows how the step back and the setback and the step back works. And that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Glenn and David. So this project has been well received by the city boards that previously reviewed it. Staff is recommending approval. Earlier this afternoon, I spoke with Jennifer about an additional condition of approval in response to some neighborhood input that she received, and that is to incorporate a requirement for construction parking as part of our construction management plan. In other words, where the contractors are going to park. So that's something that we're acceptable to, and we can proffer that as part of a new condition of approval. In response to neighborhood input, we're also proposing to further buffer the pickleball court with some landscaping around the pickleball court. And there is one condition of approval that we would like to discuss, but I'll wait for public comment, and then as part of the rebuttal, we'll discuss it. It has to do with streetscape. This project, we believe is a relatively low-density, high-quality project, consistent with what the city wants to see and consistent with the zoning of the property. And so we're proud of it and stand by it, and we have the whole team here ready to discuss and answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jennifer Garcia, planning official. For the PowerPoint, please. Can I have staff's PowerPoint, please? Thank you. Okay, so 33 Alhambra is requesting one request, and that's a mixed-use site plan. As you know, in City of Coral Gables, whenever you meet the threshold of 20,000 square feet, it triggers a site plan review by conditional use. So it goes through planning, zoning, and commission for eventual adoption. As we know, the location is an entire block, south of Navarre, just, I guess, the southeast of Alhambra on the southeast, Galeano, and a little leg of Minorca. And here's an aerial showing the location. You can see the median of Alhambra Circle. It's just east of Gables Prep, the elementary school. And this is a view looking west. You can see there right now is existing multifamily buildings on the property. As you know, the property was rezoned, I believe, 7 years ago from multifamily to mixed use. So right now, the use there right now is multifamily. So the mixed use site plan consists of a park that's on the north side, almost 3,000 square feet, a pedestrian paseo that cuts the middle of the building, and also wrapped with an arcade around I believe all sides of the building. Ground floor commercial flex space, as well as a vehicular entrance and exit off of Navarre on the northeast side of the building, and then the adaptive reuse of the historic building on the north side. So the open space provided is 23%. The requirement is 10%, so they're well over the required amount of open space. Density in this area, because in the CBD, is unlimited, but they're proposing 70 units an acre or 78 units. The height is 97 feet at 8 stories, and the FAR is 3.5, because that's including the Mediterranean bonus, 0.5 additional FAR. The front setback is allowed to be 0 feet, and the upper floor setbacks are at 10 feet, and they meet all that. It varies according to the side of the building. The parking spaces are above the requirement at 146 spaces, and bicycle parking as well as at 22 spaces when 18 is required. So there's a view looking south at the building. The residential units are above the office space and the commercial ground floor. You can see the adaptive reuse of the historic building there on 42 Navarre, and in the corner park plaza area that's on the bottom of the screen. So this was reviewed by DRC this year in May. They had neighborhood meeting as required before Board of Architects in July. They went to Board of Architects once in August. They had additional required neighborhood meeting again before going to this board in late August, and here we are today for Planning and Zoning Board meeting. They're scheduled to be reviewed by the School Community Relations Committee later this month. So letters are sent out to property owners and properties within 1,000 feet of this property. As you can see, there are 2 schools that are within the radius, which is why it's triggering the review by the schools committee. And those letters were sent out 3 times for 2 neighborhood meetings and tonight's meeting, as well as property was posted 3 times for DRC, Board of Architects, and PCB. The website was also posted 3 times. The newspaper advertisement was once, and there's also an email sent out last week to those who are subscribed to our email server. So the staff has determined this is consistent with the comp plan. It does comply with the zoning and findings of fact, which is found in your staff report, and it's satisfied as long as the conditions of approval, which are listed in your staff report. These are the highlights. Alhambra Circle sidewalk to remain open, as well as the school pickup and drop-off unaffected during construction. Shade trees and a bike path and crosswalk on Alhambra Circle, and then landscape bump outs on both sides of all three adjacent intersections. Paseos and arcades be publicly accessible at all times. A raised crosswalk for safety of the elementary school nearby at Menorca and Galeano. And then a minimum of 75% of the ground floor retail to be leased within 1 year after the last temporary certificate of occupancy. This is a concern the neighbors had that the building to the south, the Columbus Center, has been vacant since construction. So this kind of helped them think about leasing out that ground floor space. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill, how many speakers do we have in chambers?
Chambers, I believe we have one. Mr. Adams, did you sign up?
Let's go ahead and call the speaker, please.
Alex Adams.
Hello, good evening. My name's Alex Adams. I live at 50 Menorca, so I can almost spit from my balcony onto this project. I actually live in the northwest corner of the building, so I'm right square on that corner with the AT&T site and all. So I'm probably the closest person that you could possibly get to the building. Maybe because we are renters, I've never received a notice on this project. I've never received anything in the mail, even though I'm within 20 feet, 50 feet or right of way. Maybe it goes to the management, but I don't know. We do see the little sign that's smaller than this, but that's it. I wanted to say a few things, and I think one is regarding architecture, which I'll also speak after this. I think we do need to look at the Mediterranean architecture. I think that these towers do not show Mediterranean architecture. It's very modern. Not that it doesn't look attractive or good, but if you're getting a Mediterranean bonus, then I think it should look Mediterranean. That's part of the motif of the community. I do think that this street for Alhambra is a place where people do have a tendency to speed. I've seen rollover accidents because people got T-boned at some of these intersections. It's a very wide street, but it has no markings on it. So it would be very easy to convert to a bicycle lane. It would be very easy to expand sidewalks, very easy to add, landscape and everything, and really make it a great street. I understand they only control one side of one block, but we have to think with the city as a whole. One of the other things that I would ask the applicant is that for some reason it's come up in other projects here in downtown. There seems to be a hard time getting the gray FPL light poles that the city really went through a lot of, time and effort to get special lights. So if, when they're doing the site, please take the poles somewhere and save them so that you can put them back in, so that we don't end up with black poles on one block and the gray poles on every other block and end up with a mishmash, when we finish the project. That's happened with other projects in downtown. So that's one thing I would say. The retail, I don't see how it's even legally possible to ask that they lease it in a year. It's not going to happen. I live right across the street. I've lived there since the building opened. For 5 years, it hasn't happened. The historic rehab has done very well next door, the old hotel, La Palma. But in my building, there's been, no activation, and I can't think of what retail is going to come this far off of Alhambra. Even Alhambra, You look at Alan Morris's building. Has a great outside balcony and all. For a while, they tried to get a restaurant there. That even hasn't worked. So I think it's very tough. This developer, if I'm correct, has done a lot of townhouses. I don't know if it's possible, but something similar to what's over at near Phillips Park, where you have the 2-story townhouses around the bottom, I think would be probably much better than retail and office. The office has worked where it's worked is 55 Merrick. That's where an office has worked on the second floor. I lived in that building. I've lived in 10 Aragon. I've lived in 55 Merrick. I've lived in 50 Minorca. I've been in downtown for the last 15 years. So I really know downtown, and I love downtown, and we don't use our car once we park. We use the freebie, we use the trolley. It's a great place to be. It's an awesome place. I love going to play soccer at the park and everything else. So, and the one part I didn't understand from the applicant was where this pickleball court. I don't know, is that replacing the pool, or I missed it? It's on the 8th floor? So it's not a pool, it's a pickleball court? Oh, there's a pool and a pickleball. Okay. And the historic house, I heard about rehab, but can it not be a single-family residence like it is, or it can't be just a residence? I mean, because, they're in popular demand, and I think someone would pick that up quickly if it was just a residence, an extra, one unit, that sort of thing. So I really enjoy the big balconies, the nice luxury of the building, and saving the historic house. And that's all I had, really. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for taking the time to come. Jill, do we have anybody else in chambers?
No,
How about Zoom?
no one's indicated they wish to speak.
No one on Zoom and the
No,
phone
and-
platform? Okay, at this time, I'd like to go ahead and close it for public comment and open it up to the board. Chip?
But we do need a rebuttal from the.
Sorry. That is correct.
It's okay. We'll make it relatively brief. So first, I think that discussing Mr. Adams' comments, many of them of which I think are well thought out. I've worked with them before in many capacities. The architecture, I think it's something which all of you will be discussing probably later tonight as part of a separate item overall, what the city's policy is with architecture. But this project has gone through the process that's required. It went to the Board of Architects, was approved at one presentation of the Board of Architects for Mediterranean design architecture. And so we're working and we're living by the rules that are applicable to us right now. Traffic and speed along Alhambra, point well taken. We are narrowing down Alhambra with streetscape improvements. It's going to be considerably widened. Sidewalk, landscape bulb outs, area for parking and so forth, which Glenn could go into more detail. But that should help to slow down parking. And we are conscious of trying to make Alhambra, a street that really is enjoyable from a pedestrian and cyclist point of view. The gray FPL light poles, we've come across this in other projects. The same developer actually in another project, the village not too far away. So, and definitely, we will save whatever light poles that there are, historic light poles on the property, and reuse them. The retail requirement is something, again, also that's required by the code. The code requires a certain amount of, commercial, non-residential space. So that's what we have there. We're confident that with the quality of the project, the size of the project, the size of the retail spaces, their exposure to the street, that they will be successful. And the office space on the second floor, very good chance that the client itself, the developer might very well end up moving his offices there. So the office is probably already spoken for. The historic home historically has been a home. We were thinking of some sort of commercial use there. We have to see how it affects the numbers with the commercial use. We're not entirely opposed to the idea of residential on the ground floor, but the code really doesn't lend itself to putting residential on the ground floor. So those are my responses to those points. On the conditions of approval, you'll note that in conditions 4H and 5F, there are requests for putting landscape bulbouts on the other side of the street, on the opposite side of the street from the project at 3 different points. Alhambra Menorca, Alhambra Navarre, and Galeano Navarre. We're fine with putting them in at Alhambra Menorca and Alhambra Navarre. The Galeano Navarre intersection, putting that improvement on the other side of the street, we have some trepidation with because that block to our north has been completely assembled. There's one owner now of that block. It's reasonable to expect that sooner or later that property will be redeveloped, and we feel putting in the cost on top of it when you consider what you might have to pay for loss of on-street parking and so forth is just being excessive. In other words, we feel at some point there will be another development on that block that will be responsible then for putting in those improvements. We're fine, of course, with doing everything on our side of the street as well as on the opposite sides of the intersection at Alhambra and Menorca and Alhambra and Navarre. So with that said, I think we've made a pretty full presentation here, explained to you how we've learned through this process and now have a project which we think complies 100% with the code and is worthy of your approval, and we ask you follow your staff's recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Mario. Chip, before you proceed, I just want to make sure we received some emails, Jill, and those are being placed on the record?
Yes, they are. And they're also in front of your.
Correct. Okay, thank you. Chip?
I have no comment.
Okay.
No, I mean, it's an irregularly shaped lot. You're in compliance with basically your FAR, your height, your setbacks, your.
It is a unique block.
Critical to say, or?
Thank you.
Fair.
Hopefully positive, though.
Speechless.
Thank you, Chip. Felix?
I'd like to hear what Sue has to say.
Of course.
Hi, Mario.
Hey, how are you, Sue?
Well, first of all, thank you for bringing the project down to a manageable size, because I remember a year ago we were aghast at how large it was. So I applaud your efforts for doing that. A couple of things. The windows, I couldn't tell what kind of windows they were. In one depiction, it looked like it was just a regular window without any, did they call them mullions?
Yeah.
Mullions?
There'll be divided lights in the window.
Okay, but
yes.
they're mullions on
Yes,
all the windows?
correct.
Okay, I really couldn't tell,
Yes.
but thank you for clarifying that.
It goes with the architecture, yes.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you for qualifying. On-street parking, are we taking away on-street parking with
No,
this project?
all of
We're
the
not.
on-street parking is remaining.
Okay, fantastic. And bulb outs, right? We're adding bulb outs?
Yes,
Does that
in
count
fact,
toward-
there'll be, we haven't done an exact count, but there will probably be a net increase because we'll be eliminating all of the entry drives that are for the existing single units or for the smaller buildings. And all of those entry drives will be converted to parking areas. So there'll be an increase actually probably in the on-street parking.
Okay. I've got a question about, you mentioned bike path, and in some of the depictions, it shows a bike path kind of, sort of, and then it disappears on page 6 of the presentation. There's no bike path. And I'm not exactly sure what you mean by a bike path. Are you talking about a bike lane? Because a path usually is an off-street path.
It's a lane. It's a lane.
Sorry, go ahead.
Pardon me?
It's a lane because it would be on the street.
Okay, so
Yep.
it's a bike lane.
Correct.
By the way, we're trying to call them in the county mobility lanes because we wanted to accommodate e-scooters, e-bikes, micromobility in addition to bicycles. So it's just part of the jargon we're trying to change over so that we can actually accommodate more than just bicycles. Okay, but so that's an actual bike lane, and I believe I read it was 5 feet in width.
6.
A 6-foot bike lane.
I think it's.
It's rather wide for a bike lane. I mean, that would be great. I know Alex would like that. And by the way, Alex, thank you for that wonderful comment, those wonderful comments.
No, I'm sorry, it's 5, but it's separated from the sidewalk. I'm sorry, it's 5 feet, but it's separated from the sidewalk by 1.5 foot buffer.
Okay, what kind of buffer? Is it a curb or is it at grade?
It'll be just probably a different material type.
Just a different material? Okay.
That will, define the sidewalk from the bike lane.
Okay. The very safe thing to do these days with mobility lanes is to paint them green. It's very much more attractive than asphalt, number one, and it also is another visual cue for drivers to stay out of the green. So would you consider putting green paint on that?
I don't know if we can go back to show that if we can bring it up on the screen. Because actually the bike lane is incorporated, is away from the drive lane. There's the drive lane, there's the parallel parking, there's a landscape buffer, and then there's the bike lane.
Okay, do you have a picture of that? Because
Yeah, that's what we're going to see if we can bring that up in the site plan. All of this we've been working with Public Works to implement. Yeah, you'll see, here, if we can enlarge the teal.
Syrian blue, right, Glenn?
teal.
Yeah.
Okay, there's Alhambra Circle.
Enlarge the bottom of the page.
So you see we have maybe we can show in the.
Oh,
laser.
that teal, is that what you're talking about? Is that?
The teal is actually the bike lane that is separate, and so that for safety purposes, it's separated from the traffic by both a parking lane and a landscape area.
Okay, that's interesting. So how are you going to separate the parking? Because people don't know how to park. How are you going to separate the parking from intruding into the bike lane?
I didn't understand what you were saying.
Well, it's an unusual configuration. Bike lanes are usually on the opposite side of parking. So the parking is usually by the sidewalk, and a bike lane would be more towards the traffic.
Well, okay, now I understand what you're thinking. I mean, the on-street parking, the parallel parking would be accessed by way of the sidewalks that connect from the parking lane to the main sidewalk that is in the front of the
No,
building.
I got it, but how are you going to separate the parking from the bike lane? Is it a stripe?
The parking's in the white area.
See the green landscape?
There's landscaping
Correct.
separating the
There's
parking.
the green
Yeah,
buffer.
I can't tell from that depiction here. So there's a green buffer between the parking and the green bike lane and the teal bike lane.
Correct. The parking.
Gotcha.
The parking's in the white area.
Yeah.
Landscaping buffer in green, and then teal is bicycle lane.
Okay, fantastic. Did you ever consider making that bike or mobility lane all around the building?
We've been working with Public Works. They so far they haven't implemented a plan for the connectability of all of the bike lanes. I know that maybe Jennifer could speak to that, but we're right now what we are showing in the site plan is really what has been requested of us by Public Works and planning.
All right, because we're going to discuss later on the Live Local Act, and you read all through it that there has to be connectivity to transit via bike lanes, for example. So the more we build out bike lanes, the more we fulfill our obligation for Live Local and all these other projects that are coming up. But would you consider doing a bike lane all around the building?
We need to see what costs are, and we need to see what else might be requested of us. And I'm not sure right of way how much we have on those other streets.
Yeah,
Alhambra is wide right of way. I'm not.
If we can we pan to the other? If both Menorca and Galliano and Navarre are very narrow right of ways that I don't know that there's sufficient room.
Okay, what are they, about 11-foot, 10-foot lanes on Menorca?
Yeah, well, it's a 10-foot drive lane and an 8-foot parking lane, and then the remainder goes to a 5-foot sidewalk and a landscape area.
Okay. All right, so consider painting the mobility lane green, please. It's just another visual cue that this is where bikes and other things belong, and this is where cars belong, okay?
I think teal was just placed there for illustrative purposes. I don't think the intent was to paint it.
I couldn't even see that, to tell you the truth. That's why I say, where's the bike lane or bike path?
Mobility lane.
Okay, and I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Felix?
No, I have to commend the.
Can you speak up into?
I have to commend the both the developer and the architects for The land use attorney is kind of.
A little bit, maybe.
Yeah. So I have to commend you because you basically have done what Alan Morris did. You listened, you went back and addressed the major points, the massing, the compatibility, and it should be a beautiful project. And I think that the only condition that I'm a little concerned with so far is a guarantee of retail of a certain percentage, because by the time you permit it, by the time you build it, we could be in a recession. It doesn't make sense. The use is there. Obviously, the developer is going to rent it as fast as they can to make money as fast as they can. But to put that as a caveat to holding a CO or a TCO or anything like that, I think it's the wrong message. It's almost designing for failure on that condition.
Actually, just because I wanted to just say something on that note. Sure. What happens if they don't rent it, the 75%? To me, that's a bigger concern. What is the penalty?
So I had the same concern, of course, when that
Felix.
When that sort of condition is suggested or placed, because it's very hard to know if you can comply with it. But the wording of it did give us some comfort, but we can discuss it further. The applicant shall use good faith, commercially reasonable efforts to cause at least 75% of the gross leasable area of the ground floor retail commercial space to be leased to tenants under executed leases within 1 year after issuance of the last TCO or certificate of completion. So the commercially reasonable efforts, that language sort of at least gave us some comfort that, there's a, criteria of reasonableness here as far as what has to be done. I think what staff is responding to, and you heard it in Alex's comments, is the fact that there's a building across the street that has had a retail space since the day it was built and has never been leased. Why? Would be a good question. Maybe the market just isn't there, that it wasn't designed well, or whatever it might be. But we're open to your thoughts on the issue. What gave us comfort was that language of commercially reasonable efforts, because of course, we want to lease that space. We built it, we need to make money out of it, we're going to make the effort. But it's not guaranteed that we'll be able to find a tenant within a year or whatever amount of time.
Excuse me, is it retail or it could be commercial?
That ground floor space could be any sort of commercial use. So you could have
Office facility.
You could potentially have an office on the ground floor. You could have a restaurant. You could have retail.
And that would be acceptable.
It would, right. It would comply with the requirement. Yeah.
Please continue.
Sure. So I've got to tell you that one of the biggest concerns I have is that I think that the city has been a little laxed on asking for specific improvements that are adjacent to properties. I don't think that it's right to tell you to put a traffic light 3 blocks away unless you're impacting it directly. But at the same time, every time I drive down Ponce between the trail and Alhambra, we have brand new projects that are going up. And some that went up just a few years ago, you can't see the lines on Ponce when you're driving. You can't see the lanes because they're completely just gone. And I really believe that it's the responsibility of the developer to do something because it's a safety thing. Very simple. The city hasn't caught up with it. They've been trying to, but when you build an entire block, you have 3 sides around you in this parcel. I think painting the stripes, doing this, doing that, those are normal type of things, and it should really be always a condition that Public Works places on you, but they haven't been doing a good job as far as that's concerned. The other thing is the silver white lights, the historic silver white lights. I agree with Mr. Adams that they have to be amassed and preserved and reinstalled properly. And the other thing that was not mentioned is you have a contribution of the arts in public places. Are you contributing? What are you doing with
Our
it?
intent is to contribute the money to the city fund.
Okay, because I commend you on that. Because recently, people are coming up with their own artwork and they're putting it in there and you don't know what the worth is and that kind of thing. And we have a laundry list of artwork that is, backlogged, and we should be able to place them as part of the arts in public places. But I think I wanted to go out of my way to tell you that I think that you guys have done a very good job in getting it right.
Thank you.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Julio?
It's a perfect project.
Thank you.
I like everything about it. I think the
If you could speak into the mic, please.
I think the articulation of the facade has done a very nice job.
Thank you.
Separating the base from the building itself, and that articulation around the ground floor is excellent. Circulation around the building. I have the same problem that has been brought up, that what happens if you don't lease the ground floor? So I don't know if there's anything we can do to make that.
You could always recommend that condition be dropped, and we would be fine with it.
I would. I don't know if the rest of the board would support it, but I think it's not a retail street, it's not a pedestrian street, so it's got to be quite unique tenant that you put in there, and I don't want to hurt the building for that particular issue. I agree with the light poles. I live on South Greenway, and we had the white light poles, and one day overnight, the city came in, took them out, and put the ugly green ones. I don't want that to happen here. So I don't know if we can put that part of our requirement in our motion to make sure that it happens. And nothing. It's a great project. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Javier?
Thank you. I've only got, first of all, wonderful job. I think that it really is right-sized the project for the site to fit in much better with the surrounding buildings. And I've only got 2 issues, so congratulations. And the 2 issues I have, like just about everybody on this board, that 75% requirement doesn't make any kind of sense. So with regards to leasing it within a year, it might happen within a month, but it's beyond anyone's control how that's going to happen. So I would be in favor of removing that as a requirement. Now, with regards to the pickleball court, you have it on the Alhambra side, on the 8th floor.
A little bit higher, actually. It's a 9th.
The 9th
It's at the
floor,
roof level.
I'm sorry. On the roof of the 8th floor.
Right.
What kind of enclosure are you going to have around it with regards to be able to control the play?
There's a 6 foot high, actually 6'7" high parapet wall that goes on the street side, and in on the other 2, they're blank walls essentially with recessed niches that we were using to place landscape vines that would grow up and be like a green barrier in there. And one of the things that we were also exploring was to use a mass.
Do we have your
a soundproofing material that would also tend to deaden the sound. So it's kind of well contained actually on the 3 sides with the full height of the building and the adjacent apartments or condominiums. So the only open side is really the Alhambra side, and like I said, that has a parapet wall in front of it.
And will that 6'7" parapet wall be enough? Or are you going to have to put something above it? Because it can get pretty spirited.
We were hoping not to put anything above it. I don't.
Well, that's my concern, is that it's going to be 6'7", and after the 20th ball that comes out and lands on somebody's head on the Alhambra, you're going to have somebody calling and asking you, why are you not putting a screen around it? And that is going to have an aesthetic effect.
Yeah.
That is not going to be pleasant. So I like the idea of the green walls because they do mediate some of the sound. Perhaps you study some sort of, either get rid of the pickleball court or figure out, maybe you cover the green all the way across so it becomes a band.
Yeah, no, that's possible to do something with landscaping that, yes.
That goes on top of the parapet wall, to add some more height and protect the people down below as well as the owner from the liability of these things coming out. That would be my suggestion. What you do is up to you.
Okay.
I'm not going to hold it as a condition of approval, but that's what I see is going to be a problem. All right, so that would address the noise and the liability concern that I see. The final question is, why didn't you put the bike lane on the other side of the parking and pull the parking back?
That was a request by planning, and for that particular layout,
Because that's not standard for bike lanes.
That's right.
we felt that it gave more safety for the users of the bike lane or the mobility lane, I think you call it. In that, they're not directly within the traffic lane or adjacent to the traffic lane. And, it also, allowed for, I think in terms of just the biking experience, it's much nicer to be.
There are definitely pros and cons to it.
Yeah.
Because mixing vehicles and cars on the same plane is always not always a good idea. Yeah. My concern is you have a bike path, because it's not a bike lane, it's a bike path when it's inside the block.
Right.
Running through a green space. My concern is you're setting a precedent for the rest of the buildings that are going to be happening around that will eventually come. And the connectivity, if somebody changes their mind, that it doesn't make any sense because the county standard for that is on the street, as I recall. And my question is, because you will have a situation where people are turning, making a turn movement at either end, and all of a sudden a guy in a bike pops out.
That happens on the street, though, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's an interesting application, and it is perfectly okay by county standards. Okay, it's actually safer. It makes people feel safer the way that you've designed it for the lopey cyclist, the commuter cyclist, and this is a residential area. But Javier, on the other hand, does have a good point. You're setting a precedent for the rest of Alhambra.
I think that part of the precedent that is being set is that Alhambra is really a very unique street in that it has the extra width. It's a double lane. It's a very 120-foot right of way. But Galliano and all of the other side streets, or I think the other, however the final route for connecting the bike and circulation pathways, they're going to have to deal with a much narrower right of way and actually won't have the ability to probably implement putting the bike lane or the mobility lane adjacent to the sidewalk. It's going to probably have to be in the street. Right. So I think as far as setting a precedent, I think it may hopefully set it on Alhambra, but it's probably not going to be able to be applied to any other street other than
I mean, it may on another residential street, but I mean, like I said, the application is interesting. It'll create a sense of safety for the non-confident cyclist.
Yeah.
But if the building again is built next to yours, they're going to have to have the same application. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to have kind of like a zigzaggy mobility lane.
Correct.
But if I may, on that point, luckily, this is not necessarily the final end-all and be-all tonight. The condition is even worded in such a way that we need to work with the county, we need to work with the other departments within the city to sort of figure out, what the appropriate layout is. And just based on other projects, I know the county always has a lot to say, about what should be done. So, I think it's already in the condition. We could perhaps reinforce that more, that it's still subject to these further analysis and discussions and sort of a conclusion by professional staff involved as to what's the right thing to do. I think from our point of view, I sort of like it, but that's me. Imagine I don't know too much about this, but it does feel safer. I'd feel safer, riding along there. But what the professionals say at the end of the day, I guess, is what we should do. And from our point of view, whether it's on one side of the parking or the other, I don't think is a big.
That's it. That was my opinion and my suggestions. It's going to be ultimately whatever the county requires you to do, because all the roads are county roads, whether you like them or not.
Really quick, I just want to clarify the whole Alhambra streetscape. So in 2015, there was a North Ponds study. A lot of these streets were highlighted by the residents as dangerous streets. This is one of those ideas that was actually presented to the community back in 2015, 2016. They liked the idea. So what they're doing is they're just implementing that idea for their block, and hopefully the people next to them will implement on that block, and eventually the city will eventually take over the entire block. It's an active, well, I don't want to say active, it's a proposed CIP project for the city to do once we have the funding for it. So it's helpful that we have segments of it built into it.
Okay, well, that's good to know that is going to be the standard then on that street per
Yes,
the
correct.
streetscape plan.
Yes.
Perfect.
And at least Alex likes it. He told me. Alex Adams.
All right, that's the end of my comments. Congratulations, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks. I look at every project separately and individually. The developer brought a previous project, which I complimented them on, which was beautiful. I also like this project, not because of who the developer is, but because of the project itself. A couple of questions that I have. One is, for the pickleball courts, is there only one court or is it two courts?
No, there's only one court.
There's only one court. Are you going to have lighting on that court for play at night?
They're talking about having hours. We just so that we don't disturb the residents. They would only be used during daylight hours, and there would be limits on terms of use.
Okay, that's where I was actually going. We have had some comments about the noise that would be generated. I would like to ask if it was possible to limit the hours of play, and that those hours of play not only be a proffer or on a covenant, but also be on the condo docks. So when the condo docks are done, the condo docks specifically state the hours of play. As far as noise, I actually think if there is noise, the biggest complaint is going to be coming from those two penthouse units side by side, which are going to be the most expensive units.
Yes.
And they're going to scream the loudest. So I think that will govern itself within the building. I like very much what Sue said and how she labeled it the mobility lane. I think that's really good and it's true. And I would actually encourage the city and commission and staff to look at the entire city and do a plan on a mobility lane throughout. So it's actually consistent throughout projects. And it's not that one developer comes in and puts it one way, the next developer puts it another way. I would actually like to see that as a standard within there. The next thing which I have is EV charging stations. I assume that you're going to have within your parking or within your premises for electric vehicles?
Yes, we comply with the EV charging. There's in the code, there's requirements for the percentage.
It was just not talked about, but I just want to make sure.
And we were also providing sleeving for the future.
One other concern that I have is Mr. Adams stated that he didn't receive a notice. I would just like for the department to look into that. We have had issues before where notices have gone out. I know it's a separate department. It's not the developer. They hire somebody to send out the notices, and I'm well aware of that. But I'd like to look into that because it is possible that a lot of the condominiums or the associations, there's notices that are sent out to the address, not specifically to the unit or to resident, and not specifically to the individual. I just ask that we look for a way to improve that. Things do happen, and I can't tell you why Mr. Adams didn't receive a notice, specifically if he lives 20 feet from the project or so forth. But I would ask for the city and the department to actually look into that and see how that can be improved going forward. That would make me more comfortable.
Yes, we're going to actually look into that because the issue is the current occupant, the recent requirement to require it to be mailed not only the owner, but the actual current occupant. So we're looking at it with the post office to see what we can do to make sure it gets to that current occupant.
Okay, and if that could just be implemented also as a standard going forward.
Of course,
For
yeah.
for all projects, not just this. Other than that, I don't have an issue with the project. I agree with Felix that the developer, the team, the architect, everybody listened to what the community had to say and what the board had to say, and really came back with a good project.
It only took a year.
It's okay.
What's time?
And also, same as my other fellow board members, I don't agree with putting a 1-year limitation on having to rent that space. You're going to the developer is going to do everything they can to rent that space, whether it's giving months, whether it's giving a lower rate, whatever they can do to fill it, it's to their advantage. So that's why I asked the question, what's the penalty? What do you do if you can't lease it? And it's not because you haven't tried. So I would agree with what Julio said and other board members said to go ahead and actually take that away in the motion. I'm done with my comments. If there's anybody that would like to make a motion?
There was.
Well, I have one comment, and maybe this is after somebody makes a motion. But, the streetscape plan that Jennifer was talking about, I think it would be very helpful when there's a project on a street where we have a streetscape plan to have that plan provided to us to see how the project fits in to what's already been voted on in 2015. If it complies, if it has the bike lane, if it has the whatever. Because I didn't know, that there was such a thing on Alhambra, right? So whenever there's a project, if staff could provide us what it is for that street the project is on.
Certainly, yeah, we can provide that. It's kind of rare to have a streetscape for 3 blocks. We've done the community and all that. But yes, this is a rare condition, but we'll definitely can provide it in the future.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I'll move it.
Chair, there was one condition that we had objections to, which really hasn't been discussed.
The bulb outs on the opposite side.
Yeah, I don't know if.
We'll go ahead and see if the board member, Chip?
Well, I just want to know if the ink has dried on those door hangers that we approved. Is that why they didn't get them? No, I thought we had approved door hangers at a meeting before.
For neighborhood meeting, yes.
Yeah.
But if it's a building that has to have
I'm just kidding.
access to it,
We rejected it.
Yeah, I know.
We're keeping
So I'd like to
busy.
make a motion with the understanding that if 100% of it is not leased, that you earn penalty. Can we go with that? No, I'll gladly make a motion as staff has presented with the removal of the requirement of the 75% requirement on ground floor leasing.
And may I ask, what about the issue about the bulb outs on the opposite side of the street, where their staff is asking them to do those bulb outs?
There's one in particular we feel is one too many. Yeah.
Chip, your motion is as,
I mean, I'd say leave it the way it is. I mean, it improves the whole area, but if we want to discuss it further, I mean, I think it kind of makes the whole area look a little bit nicer. Now, if there's a credit due down the road, maybe that's presented to the city. I don't know if additional work is done, but if it's to improve
that's
the
a
whole
good
area.
idea, actually. I don't know if there's a way to do that, but I would be in favor if they have to go ahead and do that, and then the property that is developed that belongs to that, if there's a credit that can be given back to the other property that took care of it for them. Is that an option within the code?
Well, I don't think we have a process for that. I think the concern, as I understand from the applicant, is that they thought that it might not be physically possible to provide such a bulb out, considering the nature of the street. So, and it was one specific one. So I think it should be if permitted. So if they're concerned that they may not be able to do it because of the of the physical structure of the street. Is that what the concern is?
You know, the request was just made a few days ago, so we haven't been able to really analyze whether from a, civil perspective, we're able to do it. So that would be a good enhancement of that condition to make sure that it's something that is doable, but also your idea of recovering any costs that we could from a subsequent developer that develops
Well,
that
I mean,
block.
you can recommend
is
to
good also.
the board that they consider some sort of agenda item which would permit for costs, kind of like what they do with
Sewer and things
sewer,
like that. Yeah,
right.
same thing with sewers.
Yes.
I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, I would say we're going down a slippery slope. Water and sewer is something where it's already quantified, it's being built. It's only a matter of when the connection comes in. And by the way, you never get 100% back from WASA. Yeah. If anybody ever did, please let me know. But the whole point is that I think that I would leave the condition as it is. The applicant still has to go before the commission. They're going to get a good handle whether it can or cannot be done, whether it's feasible or not, and leave the commission, let the commission do what they're going to do in their ultimate approval.
So Chip, your recommendation is to go with staff's report?
Yeah.
Would you accept the friendly amendment?
Accept what?
A friendly amendment.
Well, okay.
To limit pickleball play to daylight hours.
Sure.
And include it in the condo docks so that we can control the noise in the area.
If I may.
Yeah, I removed the condition of the 75% lease. I removed that.
But I'm asking you to add in.
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. I have no problem with pickleball.
Okay, just, can you state your name and?
Absolutely. George Cepero, MG developer. Wanted to talk about a little bit about this issue, but first, please let me show some appreciation for the kind comments from the board, the committee. It's sometimes a little frustrating to be constantly having to raise, but look how much we are compromising. One of the very kind comments is that, and true comments is that we took notes, we went back, and we changed our plan drastically to address those concerns. And we've come in with a totally different project and a very accommodating project that's given quite a bit to the neighborhood and the city, architecturally, community-wise. You also know our history as MG as well is one of excellence, one of beauty, attention to detail, and going above and beyond what's called for. And that goes to art in public places where we're not only contributing to the fund, but we have plans to do our own art and add to that and have an even more beautiful place. And we do have our own plans on beautifying the environment, and we would like to get with the school and help them do some landscape improvements there. We're just not sure what they're going to be yet, and we certainly don't want to make it a condition or something that we have to commit right now. But that has been our culture, our tradition, our history, and something we want to continue doing. And we frankly feel that we've given plenty in this project and in previous projects. And what we're proposing has gone far and above the call of duty here. So we kindly ask, is like, let the other guy that's going to develop that side of the street, let them take care of their bulb out. There's all kinds of things on that road, drainage, sewers, things that got to be looked at. We don't know what they are and what we be committing to. So I'd like to respectfully request that the motion be amended to simply take care of our own side. We're already doing the bulb outs on both sides of Alhambra that are kind of form the entry to the project. We'll do both sides there. I think, or we think it'll be very nice. But let's leave it at that. There's going to be other things that we're going to be taking care of.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, it was pointed out to me by Jennifer, actually, there is a provision that talks about cost sharing. It's not 100% clear about how that enforcement works when somebody 10 years down the road develops it, and do you catch them at the time? But there is a provision that talks about if a developer does an improvement that, and the property owner on the opposite side gets a benefit, that they should be reimbursed for that.
Okay, good.
Portion.
Good.
Can I ask, in all due respect, can I ask staff to provide the rationale for the request? Please.
So yes, this is a conditional use request. So conditional use is all about compatibility, right? And
Okay.
also about pedestrian and vehicular, of course, circulation. Having shorter distances for crossing the street is obviously safer for pedestrians. As far as the compatibility, there are a lot of buildings that kind of are injected into a neighborhood without improvements across the street, and it becomes this kind of oddball in the neighborhood. Being able to improve the other side of the street where needed, where help pedestrian circulation, helps the building become more compatible with the existing neighborhood.
I'm just curious, what is the cost of this?
We don't know.
Well, then, there you go. You don't know. I mean, is
Yeah.
it 1,000? Is it 100,000? Is it 10,000? What is the cost of it? I mean, if this is an undue burden, I'll certainly listen to it. But if it's a couple of $1,000 bucks to
potentially-
improve safety and compatibility, I don't think it's too much of an ask for the city.
Potentially, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Chip, from what I think I was listening to behind what he was saying, or what I interpreted, is there's a lot of unknowns that can happen once you get into this. And it can result in an undue burden to the developer, and I think that's why he has raised the concern.
I think we have plenty of time between now and the commission to determine what that undue. I mean, that's just my feeling.
Understood.
I mean, I don't know how the rest of the panel feels, but
If there's pipes in the ground, you can't put a tree there, so you'd be putting in a planter that has nothing in it. We just don't know what's there. We don't know what overhead lines there may be. We don't know how this is going to affect parking, if it's going to
okay.
take out too much parking, and then folks complain. It's all kinds of
I understand,
things.
and I-
We really haven't been given an opportunity to.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
This is not the first time this has happened. I saw a similar thing with the Publix project where at the last minute, staff conditioned something and they were very hesitant. And the reason they were hesitant is exactly the reason this applicant is hesitant, because there could be a lot of unknowns where something that may look like it's a few $1,000s could become, a few $100,000.
right.
And I feel comfortable for them going to the commission, having enough time to be able to look at this condition. But I've got to tell you, in all fairness, to applicants, when you come up with a condition at the last minute like this, because I would imagine this application has been worked here for quite some time. I think it's and I'm not reprimanding staff, but I'm saying, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. We're just about ready to walk out the door, and now all of a sudden, we got to dress for snow. I don't think that's quite right.
So let me just add some verbiage to that, without any undue hardship to the developer.
So state your motion then again, please.
Approve staff's recommendation with the exception of the 75% lease. Pickleball hours are dusk to dawn or whatever, and that
Within the condo docks.
and that there's a condition that there is no undue hardship placed on the developer for the build out of the bump outs across the street.
Okay, so we have that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Felix. Any discussion?
Wait, did you have?
There was one more that you didn't mention, the white way lights.
The what?
The white way lights.
Right, that
The,
they will preserve the white lights and for the
That's
developer.
assuming they're there. I'm not even certain.
I thought
they're
that
there.
was,
I thought it was part of it also.
wasn't that part of it also? No? You have the right to remove those lights?
well, I think if they're there, you want us to keep them.
Yeah.
We're okay with that.
We're-
But I don't think it made it into the motion.
I don't think, actually, I'm fairly certain that they're not there, that the standards or the
Friendly,
Yeah, okay.
friendly amendment.
Just to clarify, it's not the white way lights, it's the silver.
Silver pole lights.
Yes.
I thought that was part of the deal.
The silver.
Yeah, because you said you wanted to retain them, right? Or
Yes,
no?
there will
If,
be.
if they're there,
They will be
they will be
replaced.
retained and
Yeah.
put back.
Right, replaced,
Okay.
in this particular area.
And what about green paint on the mobility lane?
That should be that's a standard. It goes back to there should be a standard within the city, not just this project.
Right, well, that's becoming the standard in the county. You look at Crandon Boulevard, for example, there's green bike lanes. You look at the city of Miami, green bike lanes, Miami Beach, green bike lanes. It's a visual safety factor that has become standardized across the county. We should start doing it. This is a perfect project to do it on.
But I think if that was on the street, I think but this has a green buffer, it has sidewalk, pink sidewalk and cars. I don't know that.
It's just
how
for-
a
it's
green,
just-
how a green,
It's just further identification. It's not going to cost you a lot of money.
Well, we have a motion. We have a second. If somebody would like green painted there, unless that is modified, we're going to go with what we have right now as a motion in the second.
Well, is mine a friendly amendment?
It
I would rather vote on my motion, then she can bring that up afterwards and see how. it
Okay.
goes.
Yeah, and because I think your motion should be a separate discussion. Because, for example, we've already had several projects recently where we have bike, including Publix.
Agreed.
Are they painting a green? Let's, be consistent,
I
standardize
asked
it.
that they be painted green at that
Procedurally,
But it was never
let
put
me-
in.
there's a little bit of a glitch. So at this point, there's a motion and there's a second, but now there's a motion to amend.
But they don't want to amend. They want to continue the way it is and
But
bring
but if the movement and the second do not see it as a friendly amendment,
we can
then
still
it's-
take the.
And I did not accept it as a friendly amendment. I'd rather have it as an additional discussion item.
okay.
This is
Not that we're not friends,
Bike
I
lane
just.
only.
Mobility lane.
We've already done, mobility lane. We've already done the lights.
But see, by making the motion the second, you're essentially sending it on. So
Correct,
how
with a
do
vote.
we hold this up? Okay, we'll do it that way. It's a recommendation.
So we
why
have a
not?
motion, we have a second. No other comments? Call the roll, please.
Sue Kowalinsky,
Yes.
Felix Pardo,
Yes.
Javier Salman,
Yes.
Chip Withers.
Yep.
Julio Gabriel,
Yes.
A.B. Eisenstadt.
Yes, and can we do a recommendation to the board separate from this item at this time? Would
Well,
it be
you
appropriate
might
or not?
want to make a recommendation that the Public Works Department should review the color of bike lanes and that they should be green.
And look at a
Yeah,
standardization.
but so that there's a
looking to a
standard green,
standard.
that so you don't have all
I mean,
these
if-
different
I don't know
colors.
if that's what you
Okay,
want. I was just
I make a motion for the Public Works,
Recommendation.
a recommendation that the Public Works Department paints all bike lanes, mobility lanes, anything for micromobility green for safety purposes.
And can I ask for them to study mobility lane standards throughout the entire city for future projects?
Yes, and to study, well, I mean, we already have a bike lane plan, but it would be amending the bike, hey, Jennifer, we have a bike lane plan, right? Okay, so it would be amending the bike lane plan that was already passed
For the,
to
pink color?
require that, yeah, the bike lane plan.
I don't think the master bike plan has paint color associated with it.
That's what I'm saying. So we would have to amend that plan, right?
I think you want to use proposed bike lanes because there are a million miles of existing bike lanes that you have to budget.
Well, we'll do it proposed, but I mean, the whole bike lane plan is all a proposal. We don't have any bike lanes in Coral Gables.
I think we'd just be developing a standard for Public Works to have whenever something's going to be proposed.
To
I
have
don't
a
think it's really an amendment
to
to
have
the
a
master's-
uniform standard and
master bike
possibly
plan.
change the language from bike lane to mobility lane as a recommendation from this board, if that would be possible, if that would be possible.
Okay.
If
Yeah.
not, then it's not.
I mean, it should be, because we have to accommodate all forms of transportation at this point. We don't have just bikes that are using these lanes anymore.
So we need a motion in a second.
We just want to say thank you.
I'll go ahead and second
That's
the
gonna be
motion.
part of
Your
this
recommend,
item.
I'll second the recommendation from
Okay.
Sue.
Okay.
We just take a yay or a nay?
You can do it as voice vote.
So a voice vote, everybody that's in favor of the recommendation by Sue, say aye. Aye. Anybody against? No? Okay, thank you. Let's just give it a second to clear out. Thank you. Hold on one second, please.
Okay.
I think Robert had arrived.
Oh, well, we thought you were sick from the COVID cough.
Welcome, Robert. Let the record reflect that Robert Behar has joined the meeting.
It's late.
Well, right, did you get sick from the last meeting, or did you make it through the week?
The time is 7:36 PM. Mr. Caller, if you please read the next item into the agenda, please, of the agenda.
Yes, sir. Item E2, an ordinance of the City Commission of Coral Gables, Florida, providing for text amendments to the City of Coral Gables Official Zoning Code, Article 5, Architecture, Section 5-200, Mediterranean Standards, Article 3, Uses, Section 3-402, Restrictions related to location, and Article 16, Definitions to enhance the quality of Coral Gables Mediterranean design by requiring a conceptual design review, removing duplicative criteria, relocating inapplicable standards, supplementing existing criteria, and including additional Mediterranean building examples, providing for severability, repealer, codification for an effective date. Item E2, public hearing.
Jennifer Garcia, planning official. So at the last meeting that we discussed the med bonus, it was advised that we go back and look at some of the formulas that were proposed,
Right.
and study them with the Board of Architects. So we did that last Thursday, I believe. Thursday? Yeah, September 5th. Yeah, September 5. So we were able to go criteria by criterion, as recommended with the different page numbers that you had listed. Some of those we did remove, some of those we did tweak, some of them they felt strongly to keep. With that, the memo that is on the first page of your proposed amendment, there are 8 items that were basically changed. The first one is to include that all these applications must comply with that first section of the Mediterranean Design Review Standards of Section 5-102, as recommended by this board. We also clarified the requirements for the proposed context analysis, which was that first criterion in that prerequisites table. We also strengthened the ground level and storefront design criteria as recommended by one of the guests here, one of the public speakers. We removed the awnings and canopies and balconies and the parapets, those dimension requirements that were there. We removed those as well. The board at the September 5th meeting did discuss the sliders, the horizontal sliding windows, the vertical sliding windows and horizontal sliding doors. They agreed that they should be prohibited in med design buildings.
Jennifer, they agreed that it could be permitted, should be permitted?
No, to prohibit them.
Okay.
Yeah, actually, let me describe that further. So they were okay with them being in a recessed area, but not on the very exterior of it, right? So if you had like a terrace or something that's very deep, like the balconies we saw today that are very deep and you can't really see them from pedestrian level, they're okay with allowing those sliding doors at the location, but not on the actual exterior that you see them so visibly.
I have and as we go through, I'm gonna have some comments that I went through intensively. But to that particular point, and I'm gonna ask my 3 fellow architects, if you have a balcony that is 5 feet in depth, which is a typical depth, if you put swing doors, which is what the board is saying, how do you really access the balcony? Don't you think that's gonna be an issue?
Well, I think you're going to open one of the two doors. I think you're going to open one of the two doors, not both doors. The same as the slider, you're only going to slide one of them open, not.
But if you have furniture, something, you know.
No, I understand. I think what the issue has been, as we've seen on some of the buildings that look very common, is that when you look at the fenestration, that normally that drop in the slider, you know, one of them is behind, and it just looks odd because of the depth of the mechanism of the slider itself, and it looks very, I wouldn't say cheap, but it looks very ordinary. When you have the two swinging doors, although one can be active and the other one not, they're on the same plane. There's no difference between the two. And I think also when you look at windows that are horizontal sliding compared to a vertical type of thing, the impression that you get from the fenestration, especially when you repeat it so much on the balconies, I think aesthetically, I think it looks much better. So I agree with what the Board of Architects, what they're saying is prohibiting, the way that it's written though, unfortunately, the way that it's written says prohibiting horizontal and vertical sliders. So you've got to be careful because it says windows and doors. I think you want to separate, you know, which are windows and which are doors. Because right, because if you're saying, you know, sliding, you know, horizontal windows, again, you have the same thing, that you have the face of the glass, you know, further behind, back, and it just, you know, looks different. It doesn't look the same as a door or.
So essentially, go ahead.
Just Felix, so I understand. When you say that if you have a sliding door, it doesn't look good because of the difference on the track between the glass, is what I understood.
Correct.
Are you saying that it doesn't look good from the people that are within that unit?
No.
Because from the ground floor, if I'm looking up at the 12th floor, I can't imagine my eyes being able to really distinguish that separation.
Not only are there examples like this, but some of the examples, if you recall, where staff came up here, you know, quite some time ago, on some of these gargantuan buildings that were put on US 1, where all of a sudden they were supposed to put in, you know, doors that were on the same plane, and then they were changed to these sliding doors. It became a public outcry, and then how could this happen? Not only does it look bad, but on top of that, they were able to make the change without going back to the Board of Architects, because they slid it through as a shop drawing. That became quite the thing. But when you do, even if you're down below and you're looking up 6 or 7 floors, you do see that difference. And if we're making, for example, one of the things is you have to have a 4-inch recess. Why? You know, so you have a deeper fenestration. And you have the 4-inch, it's called out in the Medcone. So you check it off, you've got that. What is the difference between 2 inches and 4 inches? That depth makes the fenestration accentuate.
Well, no matter what you do, the door to meet the NOA has to be in the middle of the block wall.
Correct.
I mean, unfortunately, it's not something that we can control. Ideally, you push it all the way back, but it doesn't meet the NOAs. That's the reality. You know, so what's going to happen is every balcony is going to have swing doors, and every windows will have to be a casement windows, or well, you can't even do a horizontal. You know, so it has to be a casement windows, right?
Right. In this case, you're correct. In this case, I tend to agree with the BOA because I'm looking at the example on Lejeune Road and US 1. You could see it, or the other one down on Caballero and US 1. You see that difference in those two buildings, which are big buildings, and your eye will go up all the way to the top, and you could see that difference. And by the way, there's no guarantee that the cadence, that this balcony is going to have them this way, and the other one's going to have them the other way, or they're just mixed any way they want. It's just, and you're right about the depth, but, depending on the jam type and the NOA, you can conceivably have less than 4 inches and still comply.
Well, I mean, on the reality is you're going to have to put a trim around the opening in order to get that 4 inches. Because if typically, and from my experience, the door width, the jam is 5 inches.
Right.
And you got an 8-inch block, huh?
A little more, 5 1/4.
5 1/4. Okay. I mean,
Let's be specific.
You sure it's a quarter? Yeah. But 5 1/4. Let's say, for lack of 5 inches. So it means that in an 8-inch block, even with the stucco, 3/4, you're gonna have 1.5 inches, 2 inches. That's it. So you're gonna have to build it out no matter what.
Right.
So the fact that you really, and I think with agreement with the chairman, maybe it's at the ground level, second level, you see it, but when you're up there, it's more important to perceive the depth created by the trim than the actual,
Well, that would be a new standard. I mean, it's just, this standard has been in here for quite some time.
And do you want to put a trim in a balcony? You see?
Let me ask you.
I'm just, you asked the question, my opinion, I tend to agree with the BOA.
Is there a depth for balcony? Is there a minimum depth for balconies? If a developer does a balcony, does a balcony have to be a minimum of 2 feet or 5 feet?
It was 2 feet. Then we went to ACTA Board of Architects, and they were okay with some cases being like a Juliet balcony and being kind of attached to a window.
But if you have a Juliet balcony, then you can't have these doors.
Operable,
Any door that opens.
No, the only door you could open is sliding doors.
Right, unless they open in, right.
Looking
Well,
back,
you can't open in because then you don't meet the wind pressures.
you can't.
Well, depending on where.
Because you gotta have a 45-degree angle for the water intrusion. So if you have a Juliet balcony, you cannot have an operable whatsoever, because does it make sense?
Looking at the project that we just saw, that project got Mediterranean bonuses
Yes.
from it. And if we take a look at the diagram or the picture of the balconies, they actually look like the old style, Mediterranean style windows, but they're sliders in 3. But they have the mullions or whatever they did to have that appearance. To me, if I'm looking up at, like I go back, if I'm looking up at the 12th floor and I see this, or I see a double door that opens up, or I can't tell you I'm going to see that gap of 1 inch up there. Well, I'm talking from a layman's term. I'm not talking on
Well, I mean, most of the people that had the public outcry were laymen. There were politicians that were upset. There were administrative people that were upset. And look, I don't want to beat this to death, but the thing is that it's a condition in there as one of the things that you must comply with.
Correct.
And the BOA was adamant.
They were, yes.
I understand. And what happens when there's no Juliet balconies? You won't be able to do a Juliet balcony.
It's possible.
No, it's not
No,
possible.
it's possible that you would not be able to.
You won't be able to do it.
Correct.
So that takes even that additional design possibility, and that in some cases you see buildings that look good to have a Juliet balcony. You won't be able to do it. In fact, unless the balcony is minimum of like 3'6", you won't be able to do it.
Right. Or,
You have to recess
operable, or maybe that particular component within that space doesn't have to be operable.
then we're gonna have a fixed storefront?
No, I mean, it could be, well, it could be a
If it's-
fixed framed opening that looks exactly like a door or a window.
But then we're doing Disney World. We're putting something that.
That isn't.
I'm sorry.
Again, most people with a Juliet balcony, I mean,
They do have, they do open it. I mean, I don't do Juliet balconies, so in the project, right? But I could see the possibility of doing it, but this will prohibit even doing that.
The outcry that Felix, the outcry of the project that you're talking about with the balconies, are they single pane?
no, double pane.
They're double panes.
No, with mullions. You're saying single pane
Right,
glass or
but they
mullions?
have-
With mullions, but the mullions don't rest the same way.
Okay.
On both sides.
They don't rest the same way on both sides,
Right.
meaning they're not on the same line?
On the same plane.
Right, and you're talking about
But
the
then
sale,
wouldn't,
right?
but then wouldn't the requirement of them being on the same plane, aren't there other ways to achieve the same
No,
law?
because Felix is saying on in a sliding glass door, there's one panel that says whatever the thickness of the door, 2 inches, 2.5 inches.
And the frame,
back,
right?
okay? I mean, there's typically the frame is about 2.5 inches or
Right.
so. So one panel sits further back, than the other. And I understand, but I think the biggest, I don't want to say a problem, but issue with the paseo and other, is that, I mean, there's a lot. If we could be here the whole entire night going through those, okay? But if you have either a Juliet, which is encouraged to do, or at least is allowed to do, then you're not gonna be able to do that. The only way you're gonna do it if you recess an area of the unit to have the balcony recess.
Aren't there sliding doors, the type that they use on boats and so forth, where you turn the handle and the balcony door actually goes out and is flush with the other door that doesn't open, so there is no?
You're correct. The problem is that none of those have NOAs, notice of acceptance for.
That doesn't exist.
For
No,
hurricane.
for wind pressures.
Right. They're not applicable for them. I think we're going to be here all night.
Well, there's just a few more items that have been changed, right?
Okay.
Oh, we have good chairs now.
Oh, yeah, that's
We clarified the optional signage language for exterior of an arcade. The concern always with arcade is the visibility to the retail or commercial on the ground floor. So reminding architects that probably you should design the signage to be on the exterior, but not requiring it. Provides flexibility with that. Then also kind of simplified the optional requirement for the first 3 to 4 stories to be activated with habitable space. We talked about that last time about requiring 80% of it for 20 feet. It's now been just generalized that it just the first 4 stories needs to have habitable space to activate the street. And then lastly, incorporate an optional requirement for the open space to be able to get a point for that with the table 1, as well as reducing that amount to 0.25% of the total construction cost. And that's it.
Mr. Chairman, I got 2 brief questions there. We've already taken care of. I had 3, but Robert already mentioned number 5. Number 7, generalize an optional requirement for the first 3 or 4 to be activated with habitable space and consistent high-quality materials. So I don't understand the term generalized.
Simplified. So before it was 20 feet and it had to be a certain percentage of the it had a formula, right? A certain percentage of the building frontage. Now it's just a requirement. So maybe it has to be the 100 per feet. Maybe it had to be 20 feet in depth, but something to activate and to provide habitable space on that street.
I'm still a little lost on the term generalized and optional requirement.
Maybe put in simplified. How's that?
And to that item, to that, condition, it says, this is where you have vehicular above in all the floors.
Correct.
I mean, I think that I don't have a problem, and I've done a project that we have it, but I think it needs to be where feasible, because if the site is only 100 feet, there's no way you're gonna be able to, and a lot of sites in the Gables are platted at 100 feet. You're gonna be able to incorporate a liner. If the site permits it, I think it's a great idea to, and one project that we're doing, I'm concealing 100% of the street frontage, but it's feasible to do it. So I think it needs to add a language of where feasible, all storage of vehicular, off-street parking above grade should be behind a habitable space. If you have the room.
To your point, on some of these lots, you just don't have the frontage to do the normal kind of ventilation you need for a parking area. And so that's where your feasibility comes in. Where you actually need to have some open area to be able to draw fresh air through.
This isn't a base requirement. This is part of the table where you meet 6 of the 12 or 8 of the 12, depending on what the land use is.
Javier, I'm not even concerned with the ventilation because you can mechanically ventilate it.
No, you can mechanically.
And it costs more, but it could be done.
A lot of money.
But you know what? That's a sacrifice that
you have to make for bed
to do it.
I agree, but there's also the practical geometric feasibilities of parking spaces and what they're trying to do. And when you have a narrow lot, sometimes you don't have that area.
Well, we just saw a project where the liner could not be wrapped around the back. It was only the principal on Alhambra Circle that it was there.
So I think a simple modification says where feasible, so allows that project to come in, because if you got to mandate it, I know you're saying it's only 6 of 12, but it's really a shame to penalize a project like that to get one of 6 or more because they would not have the room to do it. I think there's other ways to do it. We don't want to see, or I should say the intent of this code, is to conceal the cars.
And to also activate the street. Remember our fellow Vinnie was here talking about the first 4 stories.
But if you're going to put a habitable space that is 10 foot wide, and that will qualify as what can you do there? You need realistically minimum, and I think the city of Miami does have a minimum requirement.
5 feet.
Okay, huh?
Like 5 feet.
No.
It was.
No,
it was changed.
It's like 18 feet or 15 to 18 feet.
Yeah.
Because you want to put an active space.
I was thinking the Children's Trust building where it's only 5 feet deep.
Okay.
And that's how they did it.
But I know that in recently, you need either minimum 15 or 18 feet. That gives you, because you have to do from the parking, you have to have a corridor, which has to be 5 feet. And then you have to have a space, between the wall and all. You need minimum 18, and be careful, you don't need more.
Or on the ground floor, if you have a 2-story townhouse as a liner, taking care of 2 stories, the depth of 18 feet, because there are no windows on the back side, and you're going to need windows for the bedrooms, etc.
Okay. I mean, listen, you could have liner where it's a very shallow unit.
I believe that really, when you look at this, what you're really trying, in my opinion, what you're trying to say is giving this option, but most of the time you want to provide that liner on the principal street. Most of the time, if you have enough depth where you have another street behind it, you're already at 200 feet normally, because it's 100 plus 100. Now that's a different story. Now you could have the liner on both sides.
On both sides, that's a different story.
If you only have one side, let's say you're abutting the inside of the thing. The liner on the one side is still important, but the liner on the back side is not that important. You'd still provide enough fenestration with openings, etc. And you could articulate that as well as you can if you're facing an alley, to be able to do that. But that's why what threw me off was generalize an optional requirement. I would say that you're still looking at the liner requirement where you have the principal street. But when you have, let's say it's a corner lot, then it should be on the two sides.
Look, I think again, it goes back to the depth of the property. It's all relative. If you have the necessary depth, you should 100% incorporate a liner, okay? But if a lot of the properties in the Gables, and just do the math, are plotted at 100 feet, okay? When you put parking that gives you 60 feet for a stall, a drive, and a parking. And then you're gonna have 22 feet for the drive. Take your setbacks. Then what do you have left? You can't. You don't, mathematically doesn't even work. So, and you need, I mean, you could do one row of parking and, but then it's gonna take you how many more levels? I think Felix is right. If you have a property that is two streets, that you have the depth, no question.
I think maybe the terminology you're looking for is where feasible, provide habitable liner, facing
the principal street.
Well, because principal on a corner could only be one.
No, you all streets are
all,
that you
all public right of ways.
where feasible, all public
All
right of
public
way.
right of ways. That way you eliminate the alley component.
Yeah.
How do you determine feasibility? Who makes that determination? The architect that's doing the project?
It's the depth of a. I don't.
So there's a standard. What I'm asking is, there's a standard of minimum depths and so forth that come into play that confirm that it's not feasible?
Well, because
I mean,
from
is it
experience, you're
arbitrary
gonna
for
say
somebody to
it's
say
18
it's not
feet.
feasible?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to know pretty much because you could be pretty. You could use a lot of imagination depending. It could just be the depth of a room almost, or a little bit more. It doesn't have to be 18 feet. It could be
Well, but remember, you have.
if you need a corridor.
If you need a corridor.
Because the
but,
first
but,
two
but no,
floors.
but you will, because if you have a garage,
You gotta have a corridor, you gotta have a firewall.
But Robert, you could go straight out to a little patio.
but
on the ground floor.
but not on the second, third, and fourth floor.
No, on the first and second floor if you have a townhouse.
Yes, but how do you do the upper floors?
That
You need a corridor.
need the corridor.
So that's why typically I know City of Miami went through the exercise. I think like 18 feet is minimum 5, and then the wall, and a 12-foot room. I mean, listen, 12 feet is not a lot, but at least it works.
But you don't have to make it prescriptive if you're just saying.
Where feasible.
Yeah, we're feasible and you're making it habitable.
And it could be storage units for the people living in the building as well.
No. You want if you want to activate it, you want a habitable space. You want something.
I got it.
I want to see the lights. I want to see activity. I think simply by
like a
putting
movie.
word feasible will suffice.
Exactly.
So if someone's trying to do a multifamily building and they have to fulfill 6 to 12, if it's not feasible, do they still get a point for this one? That's the reason I'm not putting the word in if feasible, because they're supposed to be getting credit for doing something above and beyond.
I see what you're saying. Do they get the point if it's infeasible, and if they
Yeah,
can't meet the
feasible makes
requirement?
sense if it's an online requirement and prerequisites.
Something that I would have liked to see, and I made my notes. I went through it really carefully. You know, I've been in communication with you on this. The intent here is to conceal the garages, whether with a habitable space or an architectural treatment that looks good. Okay, we don't want to see open garages. We don't want to see any of that. That's the intent.
And not only that, I mean, you're going back to Jane Jacobs 40 years ago, where you want to have eyes on the street just from a safety standpoint.
Yeah. I see what your point about if you don't get, if it's not feasible, you get the point or not. But what if so you lots that are less than a certain depth automatically get penalized for not having. I see that a little bit, very restrictive.
Chairman?
Yes, sir.
So number 8, incorporating an optional requirement to provide additional open space and reduce the amount to pay. I don't understand the sentence, I'm sorry.
So again, the memo is just a summarize. I would actually look
Right,
into
but
the meat of it.
Can you,
Yeah, so before it was 1%, and that was reduced to 0.25%. And there's an alternative proposed.
so how do you pay this 1% or 0.25%? You know, what?
So there is a fund that the city has for acquiring properties to be parks, right? They put so much money into it every single year, I believe.
What I'm asking is, let's say I have the infamous M4, which used to be 20,000 square feet minimum lot size, and now it's 10,000 square feet lot size. And then 10% has to be open space on the ground level, right?
The M4?
I'm sorry?
What do you mean by M4?
The zoning, M4.
Mixed use or?
Right, a mixed use.
Oh, okay,
M4.
okay.
I'm sorry. So it's 10%.
With open space, yes.
So now 10% times 10,000, that's 1,000 square feet of open space. How do you determine, you know, how much you're going to reduce by the contribution to this open space requirement under number 8? I don't understand it.
No, so it's set up very similar to the Art Book Places. So a certain percentage of the project value is going to go towards a fund. And what we brought up last time with the board.
To provide additional open space
as an alternative.
As a contribution to buy
yes, for the first
lots
option.
to
Right,
make
right.
little mini parks or whatever.
Exactly, yes.
But
So
as
that's
an
the first
alternative.
option.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
The second option
Now
is
I get it.
the second option is to provide it on site, which is what was recommended by this board.
Got it.
Yeah.
I got it. We're not at page 1 yet. That's next.
No comment.
Okay. Well,
I just want to remind everyone that this is a public hearing and that we do need to indicate if there's anybody here who wants to testify at some point.
What I'd like to do is, Jennifer, are you done with your presentation?
Okay, so
We'll
we'll come back to
come back
questions.
to Jennifer. What I'd like to do is, Jill, do we have anybody that has signed up to speak? How many speakers?
One, Alex Adams.
Could you please call Mr. Adams?
I thought you guys were going to forget about me tonight. You guys got spirited there. Welcome again, Mr. Bayard, Senior.
If you state your
see you
name.
again,
and-
Oh, yes. So Alexander Adams, 50 Menorca, like I said, across the street from the previous project. So yeah, I had gone through here similarly and made some notes. So there, I have about maybe 20 notes. So I just read these into the record, and then you guys can discuss them in your items. I guess I'll go page by page. Page 2. One thing, this conceptual Mediterranean review by the Board of Architects, I'm all about public support, but at some point, you kind of have to give staff the reins, I think, and taking developers again through another series of reviews at such a very early, broad stroke, I just think is an extra hurdle in some ways. I think that should be planning and zoning. The other one is, and I don't know where this should go, honestly, but one thing I would say is when we talk about Mediterranean architecture, and I've sent it to council members before as Mediterranean architecture, I think the architecture is our art. And I think that if you're going to put exceptional Mediterranean architecture, you should get credit for the art. I think that if you look at, and I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions, just like Paseo on Plaza, but some of the best art in the Plaza project was not counted as art because it just wasn't done by an artist. But yet it was done by an architect, it was done by a landscape architect, It was done by, and these were artists of the day. So for instance, in the curvature on that project, there's a beautiful, I think it's a black granite or something, but the water feature. And it has lighting, it has plants in it and so forth. That was not considered art at all. But yet, the big blob of brass was considered art. I really have a problem with when you go down the art path and you can't say what is tasteful art, we have a lot of blobs going up in this city. Ever since the blob in the roundabout over here, 10 years, 15 years ago, there's been a lot of blob going on. So I would like to see, if you're going to do great architecture, it's art. It's public art. Back in the days, the public buildings, these were public art. You know, the museum, this building, this is an art piece. This is absolutely an art piece, you know? So I don't know where that should go, but that's one. That's a big one for me personally. What we did, talking about Miami, on page 4, any change that goes back to the Board of Architects, I think you need some minimum amount. Typically in the industry, it's 10%. I mean, that's typically what's used in a lot of cities, is anything under 10%. So you move something, you know, a window a foot, you want to move it a little bit here and there. There's got to be some wiggle room, you know. But it needs to be defined, 5%, 10%, something like that. The other one, the context analysis, similar thing. You're saying surroundings. I think, again, you need to probably say one block or something. You know, what defines the surroundings for your context plan? I think there needs to be something there. On page 6, I guess this is part of 1, the best practices, it says Historical American Building Survey. I'm not familiar as much with that particular specific reference, but I would say it's Mediterranean precedents. In other words, you can have historical buildings that are Art Deco or something else, you know? I mean, you don't want to use those. So specifically Mediterranean precedents. And then building scale. I think the biggest thing that the backlash was mostly buildings that are not symmetrical. And I think in one place here, I'll find it, it says small scale, number 4, small scale buildings may be designed asymmetrical in organic compositions. I really have hesitation with Mediterranean. Mediterranean is always pretty much, I mean, that I've seen is symmetrical. I mean, I think symmetry is probably the biggest thing. Again, I mentioned the ornate excellence. I actually put it on page 8. I don't know if that's where it should go, but what's the best place to put it? But number 5 on page 8, the shop front glass shall be clear, but we do want to allow low E. And I know the architects know about that. Like, I mean, it does have some look or some color to it, but it's environmentally friendly and it's considered clear. So I would just include that. The finished floor height, 18 inches above sidewalk or FEMA, I would say. Remember on your homeowners policies, having finished floor above FEMA or an additional 18 inches, which is what this says, gives you additional points. So it's going to help the building with their insurance and all down the line. The balconies is a great discussion. I agree with both sides, kind of. I think if you're going to do a Juliet, I would rather see it be able to be opened. And so maybe there could be a carve out that for a normal balcony that has room to do openings, it open. If it's a Juliet, it's the only case where you allow, some sort of a slider or something. I think there could be a carve out for that. But in general, you want it to open out is the intent. And then on page 11, number 10, talking about sidewalk improvements. We talked about it in the last one as far as street lights. So where it says shade trees, undergrounding utilities, sidewalks, bikeways, it says other public realm. I would specifically add bike racks, lighting, and bulb outs as specifics, and then you could say and other. But I think we really need to start talking about bike racks in the city. That is really also a low-hanging fruit for art. You can do bike art, racks. I know some people, you want to be able to connect your bike at different points and all. But again, giving more alternatives. But it's really important, the streetscape. So the lighting, the bike racks, the sidewalks and all. And then we move on. Then the other one was all the way to page 25, so we're skipping very quick. Number 2, this says, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but it says included following specific Mediterranean character defining features. This says number A, asymmetry may have secondary masses of symmetry. And I feel like that's backwards. Like it should be symmetry, and you could have secondary masses of asymmetry. So we want symmetry, and you can add asymmetry secondarily. And same thing with I, varied windows and door types and configurations in asymmetrical rhythms comprised mostly of double casements. I think you actually want symmetrical rhythms, unless I'm reading that wrong. That seems to me. And the last ones on page 26 was, let's see, elevator mechanical equipment, parapets shall not count towards height. I think you need to say also Mediterranean architectural elements. So Mediterranean architectural elements of some sorts not count towards height, which you have a lot, the Biltmore and other things, those typically were not counted. So those are my specifics, and I look forward to more debate and hearing.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask the speaker? Sure. You said symmetry. Mm-hmm. If my memory doesn't fail me, Addison Meissner, who did a lot of Mediterranean work through the Palm Beach, to me, in Boca, yeah, very, very, very great. If you study his work, very little of his work was symmetrical, but yet the composition that he did was, my opinion, professional opinion, excellent. So symmetry doesn't mean that it's good for Mediterranean. I think that when you analyze a lot of the Mediterranean buildings, not only in here, but in Europe, there's a lot of non-symmetrical. So I think that, my opinion, I think the architect should have the ability, the freedom to do, a composition that really is exceptional and doesn't have to be symmetrical. I mean, that's when you say should be symmetrical, I respectfully disagree. And we work together. I know Adam now for I don't know how many years, but I think that you really could make a beautiful, especially on the smaller building, is where you really could have an opportunity to be very nice and have those different height, different volume.
If you look at Douglas Entrance, which is one of the best Mediterranean buildings in town.
That's a good one. I'll agree with you there.
Douglas Entrance, which is one of the best Mediterranean buildings that we have in the city, there's nothing symmetrical.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing symmetrical.
Yeah,
in that
Phineas Pace office on Ponce de Leon Boulevard, just south of Miracle Mile, 2 blocks out. On the west side is a beautiful building. It's asymmetrical in its primary design. It's symmetrical in its components. So, but it's the composition that makes it so beautiful.
And maybe that could be further massaged or clarified because, I mean, I agree with you on Douglas and I agree with you on some others.
No, Douglas is a
And-
perfect example. And,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Last meeting, he almost gave me COVID. Today, he's helping me out.
So no, I mean, but I think the hard part, and I've been in planning and zoning for many years too, and all is where you start. I think you start with symmetry, and then if it is exceptional, if it is, let the Board of Architects, let planning and zoning, let the good architects, the great architects, have flexibility. But you start from a minimum at symmetry, and then you go away for key features. And the other thing, I'll just make a brief comment. When we did all the analysis for Miami 21 and Miami and all that, 15 feet was the minimum on liners, typically. That's what we found. And that's what DPZ and others have done all over the country. That's typically what they've used. Now, I don't know if that includes the hallway or not, or how they're figuring that number.
It didn't. It was just the habitable space 50. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
Correct.
But usually I would say, talking about the 100-foot lot, usually a 100-foot lot, you're not going to do structured parking. I mean, it's going to be very, very tight, and it's going to be very inefficient. So typically, if you're in structured parking, you have, like the last project, you have more than 100 feet. You have,
Let me tell you, there's a lot of areas.
Can you do it in 100 feet and have structured parking?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, we have a lot of examples that unfortunately,
Super tight? Yeah.
very, I mean,
Inefficient.
because you have no choice.
Very inefficient.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to
Thank
address
you.
two things
Sorry,
that.
thank you.
I just
wanted
want
to
to
address
say-
two things that Mr. Adams had
Thank you,
mentioned.
Mr. Adams.
And that is that the best practices manual and et cetera, that should be online for the public to see. Furthermore, the examples on page 24, which now go from A to Z, staff, I think, should create basically a pictorial of every example that is there and put it online so the public can see what the intent is. Right now, they read the ordinance and they're going to have to research every one of these buildings, having a simple pictorial, maybe the best shot of that particular piece of architecture, I think would go a long way, where people then start to understand what the vocabulary is.
If you don't mind, Fios, I'd like to see if there's any other speakers, only because I'd like to go ahead and close it. If not,
No more speakers, no.
neither on Zoom or,
They haven't indicated or raised their hands. if
okay,
they
so
wish to
at this
speak.
point, I'll go ahead and close it to public comment. Please continue, Philip.
Sure. So I think having those two things there is not only just a tool for the people that are using the code, but it's also a great explanation of the vernacular. And I think it's very important for people to have that as an example, so they understand it. I also believe, Mr. Chairman, that we got to basically page 1. I really believe that we went through an hour and a half public hearing, which the applicant deserved to be heard. I think that it is very difficult. Mr. Adams just took a little bit of time here. He was, a person that just went through, what we went through. And if you multiply the amount of people, I think it's very difficult to actually look at every single one of these points in this format. I really believe that, it should be more of maybe a planning board workshop to go over just the code, where we concentrate on only the code. And I think it would be much more fruitful if we do it that way, open to the public, and do it that way, because I think if you go through every one of the pages, because for me, I marked up most of the sheets with comments, and I did it in 3 different colors. I would love to be able to make color copies, or have staff make color copies of this, and staff keep a copy and then give them to all the board members so they could see my concerns. So when I start talking about it, it doesn't become abstract. That's just a suggestion, because I think that this is such an important item that it will take hours and hours and hours to do it. That's just my comment.
I think what I'm hearing, if I'm understanding you correctly, is that for this item, you'd like to have a session that will bring more input from the public, which I wonder if it will or it won't, because people, from my experience, usually don't come to some of these things except at the end when they have an issue, and that's when they come and say things. But given that, what you're saying is you want to have a workshop type style where you devote the same way we originally did with the zoning code rewrite, to go ahead and look at this item by item. I mean, we sat here during that zoning code rewrite years ago, the first one, where we sat here till midnight, for example. Started at 6 o'clock. Javier was on that with me. It was myself, Javier, and I know Robert.
Robert was there.
Yeah, it was the 3 of us, and there were other individuals. We sat basically from 6 at night to midnight, over and over and over and over, going through line by line, item by item. Is that what you're suggesting to do with this?
Because I didn't sit on that one, I sat on the original. And it took that amount of time because it was so voluminous. And in fact, we were transitioning from the original zoning code to the first ever, more current one that we have today. What I'm saying is that this only has 26 pages, but there's a lot of room for debate. We spent, a good 20 minutes just talking about the depth of the windows, whether the sliders go this way, that way. But what we're discussing is actually bonus items, prerequisite items, bonus items for level 1, bonus items for level 2. I mean, they're important, and I would like to hear at least all of our board members be able to contribute to either agree or disagree.
I think you're absolutely correct. I think that this deserves to be one meeting specifically for this. I know that myself, there's a lot of comments. I know that with half an hour left, we're not going to finish. So I think that maybe we got to schedule a meeting solely for this. Whether we get input from the public or not, I think our comments is going to take every bit of those 3 hours that we're going to have.
And that's the thing. And you remember, Robert, when we were on the Blue Ribbon Committee, that went on hours and hours.
Yeah,
but we were moving in the right direction.
We were moving in this direction.
Exactly. And we still have an item to discuss, which is extremely important. I'm not trying to just table it. I'm trying to make sure that we just do it the right way.
Would not you, but would the board like to add an additional date to discuss this as opposed to the dates that we currently have already set on the agenda? And the reason I ask that is because I don't know what projects or what is in the pipeline coming to us. And I think when we discuss this, from what I'm hearing from everybody, is that we like to have a meeting where this is the only item on the agenda.
I think that would be the least disruptive to staff and the applicants, because unless there's a month that there's no application or no other item, I think it would be,
Jennifer, what's the minimum time that we need to advertise to have a special meeting?
10 days.
Huh?
10 days.
Okay? I mean, I'm 2 weeks from today. I
You
mean,
want to start at 4 o'clock?
I'm okay with that. You know what? I'd rather start at 4, and if we finish by 7, leave at 7, not leave at 9. You know?
I agree.
And
Jennifer, do you know if the commission is waiting for this?
They are. And I think actually the Board of Architects is probably the one that was most adamant about letting this move through the process so they can use it for their review. They've been working on this for over a year and a half.
So
Board's had it
if
since
you had a
November of
meeting
last year.
2 weeks from now, if it's feasible, would that create an issue, a delay?
Yeah, I mean, that's just more projects that have the same criteria we have today. Fine.
I mean, I'm just trying to say that in all fairness to everyone that's anticipating this, adding that additional date as suggested by the chairman, I think is a great idea. Starting off earlier, as suggested by Robert, is a great idea. But that way we could do. There's no way we're going to do anything today to get this done. Right. But to start off fresh, and the other thing is, I don't know legally if we have our own comments, where we could give it to staff and staff could make copies, and at least everybody has the ability of seeing, these areas that are important.
Well, there is a little bit of I think there's a way to do it, but I don't think we can do it in that way. I think if we haven't, there's a sunshine issue with communicating comments back and forth.
Oh, no, I'm not saying back and forth. What I'm saying is giving them to staff and having staff distribute only so we're prepared that by the time we come to the next meeting in 2 weeks,
Right,
that we already have at least something.
I think the way to do it would be to the members distribute it at an open meeting where copies are made available to everyone, and they're also available to the board. So it's at a meeting where that's done. You can't put staff in the position of being the vehicle. So I would suggest, unfortunately, I don't know how you could do it and then avoid that. I will check with the city attorney to see what her position would be if the notes, each person's notes are copied and distributed prior to the meeting. And I will check and see. It may not be possible to do it that way, but I will discuss it with her. I also think that this room is always in such demand, and we've had meetings, and it may not be as ideal, where in the conference room of the planning department where it's been recorded. I don't know if that would be an option.
if you do a workshop,
Right, well, that's what we're talking about,
and
right?
then you can do it.
And I'm saying, even the police department has all of it. We just had a charter review committee there the other day with the commission.
Right,
And it was a
well-
great location, and it can be televised, et cetera. They have all the equipment already set up.
So what do you think, Jennifer?
Fine. We can see what's available.
But we'll probably likely need, well, I'll discuss again with the city attorney whether we probably will want to have a court reporter at that meeting.
You won't have a court reporter.
We probably will have to.
At a workshop.
At a workshop, we probably would have the reporter. I'll discuss that because it's
And
part
for-
of a legislative item that's being,
And for the workshop, we still need 10 days notice?
yes. Yes. So I don't know what the feasibility is of.
I mean, you'd have to circulate dates.
Right.
Right.
Because you got to find out what's available, when it's available, and who's available.
Correct.
So I don't think that's a determination that could be made right now. Not because each of us may or may not know our schedules, but we don't know where they can fit us.
Right. And I will be out until the 26th.
So let's have it the 23rd. I'm just teasing. Just teasing.
No, no, Sue, don't say that.
You see what I
No,
started?
actually, wait till you hear my comments.
So I think going back to this, I think what I'm sensing or what I'm hearing is that that the board as a whole would really like to have a workshop to go into depth and into detail on this. And we are, as a board as a whole, are requesting staff to go ahead and try to set that up on a time that we can all attend.
I have one other question. I know you want to call it a workshop, but if you're able to come to some decision and you want to make a motion for a recommendation for approval with modifications, I think you would want to be in a position to do that. So I know you want to call it a workshop. I think my inclination was to say a special meeting.
I think that's the way to go.
That's fine.
That's the way to go. We don't need to have a workshop then to come back and have the meeting so we could vote on it.
I just use workshop thinking you roll up your sleeves and get it done.
Well, I think you can roll up your sleeves and still call it a special meeting.
Here, let me go ahead.
All right, so now that we understand that that's what we would like, do we need a motion to defer
You
this
need a
item?
motion to defer with the request for a special meeting with all deliberate speed.
So moved.
At a date when we are
First available date.
Right.
Well,
First mutually agreeable available date.
Right. So moved.
Second.
any discussion?
One other thought.
Yes, Chip?
Look
If
at
it
some
turns
dates
out,
now, to
if it
give them some
turns
dates
out
now
that
amongst us.
you can't come to a date that's agreeable other than next month, maybe we can think about starting earlier. So if we can't find another date and we have to meet here next month, that we could consider starting it at 4 o'clock. Is that a problem for the board, since you're already scheduling that?
No, I just don't know if really have a month to wait to do that.
Right, well, we're hoping that we can find a date that everybody can agree
Well,
to.
I mean, I think if you come back to us and tell us these are the available dates, and then
Why don't we give some dates now?
Right, Robert, just so you know, Sue gets back from China on the 25th, evening on the 25th. So Thursday would be a 26th. If you do that,
Other following Wednesday, we could even do that, no?
Right.
Second?
Well, as a second date, right? So in 2 weeks, that would be the 26th of September, Thursday, or
I wanted to give her a week of being inoculated before I sit next to her at the meeting.
Well,
no. We'll sit her next to Julio. He's
you and I will switch.
done.
All right, so
The
See, then we're
second,
gonna forget you.
the second date, Mr. Chairman, would be Wednesday, the 2nd, which would be in 3 weeks. So
Yeah,
so right now, we're floating 26th or 2nd.
either one.
Now, does it have to be on a Wednesday?
No, the first one, 26, is a Thursday.
Got it, okay, and the second
Because
one,
she gets back on Wednesday.
I think October 2nd might be an issue. I'm looking at the.
It could be a
religious
couple of days
holidays, so-
before. What day is October 2nd?
Wednesday?
We could be on a Tuesday. I mean, it doesn't really,
we got to find out what's available.
Okay, let's find out what's available.
it could be the first, the second, the third.
The venue, if it's available, could be the police station.
If this isn't available.
That's what I'm saying.
If this is not available, it could be there,
Or at the
and
youth
they have
center.
public there all the time. And it could be
So
recorded.
the idea, just to be clear, would be sometime between the 26th to about the 2nd.
Yeah, October 2nd is Rosh Hashanah
Okay.
at sundown. So that would be probably a problem.
Right, October 1st.
October
So
1st.
between 26th and the 1st?
Third. The third is Rosh Hashanah, not the second.
Well, the
There's
way
this-
it works is it's
Oh, I
always
see
the
what you're saying.
evening
Yes, that's right.
before,
Yes.
right?
Basketball, nikele moshe pandikime, maru hata.
Okay, so
I'll accept his motion.
the motion is between that. We have, who seconded it? By Felix,
Felix second.
by
sorry.
Chip Withers,
I have
No, Behar.
I just want to make,
by Mr. Behar. Yes, sir.
through the chair, a friendly amendment that we start early,
At 4 o'clock. The idea would be to start at 4 o'clock.
included in the recommendation.
Is that okay with you, Felix, to start at 4 o'clock
Yes.
on the
With
day?
dinner, sir. I think if we start early, I'll bring some lunch.
So at 4 o'clock, preferably a start time on this. We have the second, which Mr. Behar agreed to. Any other discussion? No? Call the roll for deferment on it?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
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 Yes. Thank you.
We have one more item.
Why not? Yes.
So this last item is pretty lengthy. The presentation is pretty lengthy, and I'm sure the discussion's even going to be longer. I would suggest we just postpone on this.
Well, we have 15 more minutes before we have to ask for an extension of time, which I think my other board members to my right and my left may not agree to an extension of time.
Mr. Chairman, if
So-
Jennifer's telling us, Ms. Garcia's telling us that it's going to be a lengthy, and it's going to take, I think,
Yeah, there's no rush on this one. We don't have any pending
Okay.
applications that we
Okay.
need to amend
So
this
let's,
one.
is there a motion to defer?
So moved.
Till, do we need, you're going to re-advertise, I assume, right? Okay, so there's a motion to defer.
I'll
by-
second it.
Date uncertain.
By Javier, second by Robert.
And with all the people, we're sorry that you have to not.
People who are here?
Huge public turnout on this
Let the
one.
record
Everybody
reflect
in-
that no one is present to.
Correct. Let
request
the
it.
record reflect that. Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody against? No? Given that, I'd like to see if there's a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I say we stay another 15 minutes.
I move to adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Sue.
You don't want to stay for 15
Sue makes a
more
motion
minutes?
to adjourn. Is there a second?
I second.
Julio seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? Thank you very much.
Have we
Have a
off the
wonderful
record?
night.
After I sat outside for an hour and a half?